Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. Right, so Kabam has responded to the Banquet feedback basically, and Kabam Crashed, which is Kabam John that we have seen in streams, has posted quite a long post. I do agree with some, I do disagree with other parts of it, but in general, again, I want to highlight that I do appreciate the way Kabam Crashed kind of like comes across and conducts himself. Seems quite reasonable, quite good at what he does, and there's no sass towards the community. Right. So let's read through it. It is a bit of a read, and I'm gonna be giving my thoughts in between the paragraphs. So hey everyone, I thought this would be a good place to share some of my closing thoughts on Banquet this year. This is not me making excuses, but just trying to be transparent as possible about what I and the others responsible for the event were thinking as we learn from it and move on to 2024. I want to start by saying that the team absolutely understands your concerns and we do care about them. The part of the community that can engage in dialogue on the forums, YouTube, Reddit, and other social media represents a slice of our most engaged long-term fans. We absolutely want to surprise and delight you, and in the case of Banquet 2023, it's clear for many of you that did not happen. I think there are a few reasons why things ended up this way. The first was, as I said in one of our live streams, we wanted to do everything possible to encourage people to do Necropolis by moving rewards away from the offers into the content. We tuned rewards through the end of this year and into the first part of the next year accordingly. This was successful. Our engagement with Necropolis has exceeded even our highest expectations. However, I do agree, despite this, that portions of the Banquet event ended up undertuned, particularly rank up materials in the milestones and afterwards. And this is kind of like the gist of it, to be honest. Like, that is exactly what happened. Necropolis is awesome. Community received Necropolis amazingly, and it is understandable. And I kind of like the idea for sure, where the content is more important than the offers. Absolutely, I wish they carry on with it. But it's not either or type of proposition. I, in one of my live streams, kind of compared the Kabam's crush job, or whoever is dealing with the game economy, as a chef. You can't overcook the food, you can't undercook the food. It's the same thing as that you can't, make gifting event super jacked and super stacked, but you can't make it as piss poor as it was this year either. You need to get it right so players do enjoy it. And this, together with something that he mentions later into the text, where the progression of the game has just increased, and there is a bigger than ever difference from the top tier players to the lower tier players. And what I mean by that is not just the whales who whale the most. What I mean is there are people picking up this game in month 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and they're like Cav and Low Thronebreaker. And then there are like top tier, high end Valiant players. And they are playing completely different types of games. And this event not being progression based makes it kind of impossible to satisfy everybody and make it, completely not busted for the newer players at the same time. And yeah, I also think he identified the biggest problems for sure. One of my biggest pet peeves with this entire event was the fact that I couldn't even get a single champion to rank 2 as a 7-star. That's awful. As far as events are concerned, it's like you could not even get enough rank up materials to take a 7-star from rank 1 to rank 2. And I ended up spending like $250 on it and additional 10,000 units. So that's, let's say, 4 or 5 Odin's worth of units, and I can't even get a rank 2 out of it. Obviously, I did get some other stuff that I do like duped Professor X, which is going to be something we talk about later. But yeah, it is an oversight, clearly, in my opinion. Second reason is that internally we value the limited pool 7-star gifted Guardians crystal higher than a lot of you did. To us, it carried enough value that it would make the milestones worth it. Overall, player base seems to have agreed, more on this later, but clearly for some of you that was not the case. And this is another thing, like the 7-star Guardians champions and that 7-star Guardians crystal could have been as valuable as they thought, if they actually did not include the Sandman, if they didn't include the Professor X, and if they included, some of the heavier hitting champions that community is like really, really desperately chasing for. And the selection there, especially when it comes to champions like Sandman, for instance, who needs high sig in order to function and is not particularly amazing to begin with, kind of undervalued that crystal a lot. And even some of the, like Moondragon, for instance, yeah, it's fine, I guess. Like, is anybody super hyped pulling Moondragon? Maybe like 3 people. So I think if the choices in that crystal would have been better, then the response of the community also would have been better. But it still wouldn't have changed my thoughts, even with better champions in the 7-star Gifted Guardians crystal, if the rank up material situation was as poor as it was. The third reason is that many of you have said here and elsewhere, the Banquet event is not is the one event that isn't separated by progression, and over time the gap from low progression to high progression increases. I don't think I need to say more about this. Yeah, exactly. That's a big problem. That's the reason why a lot of those calendars are kind of sucky, because then same for everybody and stuff like that. The fourth reason is that Banquet crystals themselves are deliberately designed not to be great for our top players, but I think aiming for a certain mix of high filler and high quality chase rewards, we still ended up slightly undertuned. You ended up very undertuned, and I'm going to explain that bit in a shortly. There will always be filler in these crystals. That's just the reality of the situation. If a player doesn't like that, then the event isn't for them. However, about every 83% of the crystal was filler for top players this year, and I do agree that it is too high. We went through something similar last year with the inclusion of Tier 4 CC, but I think that this year there was an additional challenge. For top players, 6-star champion acquisition materials are basically worthless, exactly. And 7-star shards were still too valuable to make a meaningful portion of the crystal. Without champion acquisitions, options to fill up the crystal, we ended up in a tough place. And here, what I must point out, even those 17%, because if 1 out of 5 crystals would be something like really nice, I think that would still be a very decent proposition. But the problem that he does not name here is that within those 17%, they include stuff like 600 Titan shards. And that's just laughable. So somebody did the math on this. So if you had like the perfect luck and you only pulled Titan shards from your greater gift Banquet crystal, you would still need 10,000 units to get like a Titan crystal. That's a ridiculously high amount. And that's assuming you get like the most insane, unreal godlike RNG. Because the quantities themselves of the good things, the 7-star shards and whatnot, were also just like, 750 7-star shards. That's like nothing. 750 7-star shards are significantly less valuable than they were upon the release of 7-stars. Because whether we like it or not, 7-star acquisition has sped up. And the Greater Banquet crystals pretended that 7-stars are released yesterday. And then obviously everything else that was geared towards 6 stars for top progressing players, just not quite meaningful for top tier players. With that all said, I do want to address a couple of concerns that I don't agree with. First, on the idea for people who tune these events don't understand the game. I have seen various suggestions that we should hire more high tier players to work on this event. This wasn't a problem in this case. Of 7 people who worked on this event, 2 of us were Valiant before the start of December, 2 are high Paragon players who have completed Necropolis, and the remaining 3 are all either Paragon or Thronebreaker. If anything, compared to the population of our players, our team is top heavy. We knew generally where this event would land, and that the event wasn't as good for our endgame players compared to the last year, relative to the current state of the game. Again, I think the main difference perception is the value we placed on the Gifted Guardians crystals. The value placed on that crystal took up too much of the reward budget and directly resulted in the rank up resource being undertuned in the milestones. We also could have included some tier 4 alpha in rank rewards below top 90 and probably some more 6-star 45 rank up gems. Yeah, that is called hindsight. They should have done all these things. They should not have, like, this is one of those things where I agree with. they should have included some rank 4 to 5 gems in the milestone rewards. They should have included some other more meaningful rewards higher up. And yeah, they did definitely place too much value on the 7-star crystal because, again, half of the 7 stars people really don't care about. And then when there is such an emphasis on like pulling the new 7-star and they filled it the way they did, here's what it is. Definitely missing rank ups from this event completely for anybody that didn't get to top 90. The second is that despite the negative response from our engaged community, Banquet 2023 was broadly very successful. I'll be honest, after seeing the initial reaction on these forums, I was pretty worried, but in the end, players opened a lot of Banquet crystals, approximately 34% more than last year. And this one is a bit cheeky, because this year they gave us, many people saved up their Cyber Weekend units for this if they spent some money on Cyber Weekend offers. Because those events weren't that crazy, and a lot of people were just saving units in general. So I appreciate the fact that 34% more Banquet crystals are opened more this year than last year, but Kabam did release some more special quote-unquote offers for them than they did previously, as well as just the simple fact that everybody was kind of bulking up for it, because year before Cyber Weekend was good, so people kind of spent all their units there. Now people were generally saving their units for Cyber Weekend, and that was disappointing. And then they kept saving for Banquet, and Banquet was disappointing. So I think it's much more to do with just the way the game economy worked with the recent offers and everything else happening in the game, rather than people loving the Banquet event more. But yeah, part of this was that players had more units going into this event this year, absolutely. But the big reason was that despite common belief, the Banquet event is actually one of our most broad-based sales events of the year. It's one of our least top-heavy events in terms of percentage of participation coming from the top players. And now it's counterintuitive in some ways, given that it takes to climb the leaderboard, but it also makes sense when you think about how good the event was for lower progressing players. But I do agree with that. I said this since the beginning. If you're like Cab or Thronebreaker and you have been saving for this event, it is still a very, very, very good event for you, especially if you are looking in 6-star roster expansion and acquiring more 6-star champions. Probably the player base whole did think the Gifted Guardians Crystal was worth completing for milestones for. So if you want to argue, I mean, that was like making the best out of the worst situation, because it was in fact the only thing that was remotely appealing in like the solo and alliance objectives. So if you want to argue the event was bad because it left many top players without the rewards they expected, by all means make that argument. I'm sympathetic to it. But if you want to argue that it was bad because it wasn't successful from the business participation, oh no. Kabam made their money. Good. Now Kabam can't make any excuses that, they didn't make enough money on the Banquet event. I'm happy with that. Right. Finally, bringing this back to the question at hand, are Kabam devs happy with the Banquet results? I can't speak for everybody on the team, but I would say I'm overall neutral. You should not be pleased with it. Everything else is coping. On the plus side, we got more players in Necropolis. Absolutely. I do love that. I do love how many people are jumping in Necropolis. Had a successful event with broad-based participation and didn't substantially devalue very much economically aside from the 6-star Guardians. We still have huge roster of unreleased 7-star champions, rank 3 materials, and other champions items like 6 stones and awakening gems that we are holding substantial value. You could see world where Banquet introduced 7-star awakening gems or 6 stones, and it made more money in short term, and players were happier, but in the long term, we were in worse shape. On the downside, a lot of our most engaged players are pretty unhappy right now with the Banquet event, compounding concerns about Alliance War, Defender AI, Meta event, and other legitimate issues we need to address. What I can say in closing is that we are listening and we are learning. We aim to prize and delight as many as possible as we. That's good. That is what you wish a Kabam dev would approach. This is how you want, every major event reviewed. I'm going to say it like that. You don't want any of the sass or snarky attitude or less of it anyways. And because this is truthful, because before somebody accused me of brown-nosing Kabam crushed, I don't. I disagree with several things here, as I mentioned in the video. about the Great Guardian Crystal, obviously, you know, hindsight being 2020, plenty of other things. At the same time, you kind of want more of this, a lot more of this. Because here is a thoughtful, insightful post. They admit to their mistakes or their oversights. They, you know, break down the situation. And it's also informative. Now we know that, you know, the Banquet event overall didn't do as bad as, like, you know, YouTube would maybe make it seem. And I appreciate that. And we definitely do need much more of this, for sure. Let me know what you guys think about this post, and I'm going to catch you guys soon. Bye-bye. Hello there, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information